was unable to take any celestial death. White sand.
Want to see? Well, this all. Till tonight, no water. To give up.
We'll reach the deck.
5 ships. At my age.
Still looking to you.
Looking to me for what? They are only as soft.
First make that distinction. Vessel. We were blown off course too much.
As the vibrant new FX, Hulu version of James Clavell's 1975 book Shogun gets underway, it's 1600 in Japan, a region marked by unease and the constant threat of bloodshed. Following the passing of the Taiko in power and the immaturity of his successor, 5 daimyo, or local warlords, fought it out for complete control over an army of fervently devoted samurai. Shogun was the old word for that type of unquestionable authority. And it was just a question of which daimyo, with his military power, cunning, and brutality, would take it. However, there was still another power center. A more recent one. Portuguese Catholics had monopolized commerce with Japan by the 17th century. They made money from trade in Japan mostly by hiding the nation from their sworn adversaries, the Protestant countries of Europe. And that's when a brazen, sultry Englishman appears as the pilot of a broken Dutch fleet in 1600. It is explained to Captain General Ned Dennehy that the clouds prevented him from taking any heavenly locations. Regarding Magellan's Pass, John Blackthorne, Cosmo Jarvis asserts that the Spaniard's rudder was correct. He has no food and no water, so the captain tells him it's time to start formulating preparations. Blackthorne is optimistic that they will land and arrive in Japan. The captain informs him they had more than 500 people on board and 5 ships. He is reminded by Blackthorne that 12 men still reside in the Erasmus. Blackthorne finds out that the captain feels they can't complete their job, therefore he wants to take the coward's route out. It's a glorious release, according to the captain. A Japanese guy wearing a cross steps outside and then makes out a boat in the mist. As they approach, samurai storm the boat. There are famished guys on board. A few seconds later, a group arrives at Osaka Castle. Instead, the shogun concentrates on the schemes of the royal, moral, and intelligent daimyo Lord Yoshi Toranaga, Hiroyuki Sanada, to undermine his opponents on the Council of Regents, an organization headed by the cunning Ishido Kazunari, Takehiro Hira, who reigns from the imposing and fortress-like Osaka Castle. Tokuma Nishioka as General Toda Hiramatsu and Yuki Kura as his impetuous yet enthusiastic son Yoshi Nagakado are 2 of Toranaga's devoted friends. But when bold and courageous ship's pilot John Blackthorne, Cosmo Jarvis, arrives in Japan, Lady Toda Mariko becomes Toranaga's most valuable asset. Anna Sawai, who plays Mariko, is a rising star who had the standout performance in Monarch, Legacy of Monsters. Fluent in Portuguese, Mariko was converted to Catholicism. She will also be the crucial conduit for communication between Toranaga, Lord of the Kanto, and Blackthorne the Barbarian, serving as a translator. And who knows? Maybe they won't all perish when the armies of the 4 other regents and the Portuguese priests turn against them if the cunning daimyo's long-term plan succeeds. They should keep themselves to their private chambers, requests Lord Ishido. They can't believe he arrived at all. They say that a wise man understands when his time is running out. The Council of Regents tells Yoshi Toranaga, Hiroyuki Sanada, how much they value his presence. He is reminded that Taiko passed away a year ago. They charge Toranaga with coordinating authority against the council, using his 6 challenged weddings as evidence. As Lord of the Kanto, Toranaga claims to be happy. He continues by promising that he will never be the first to disturb the calm. They claim that the heir's mother was brought to his castle in Edo, but he clarifies that his daughter-in-law is pregnant and that Lady Okiba's sister was involved. They imply that in order to ensure his protection, she has been kidnapped. Ishido, take Hirohira, is informed by Toranaga that there is peace at this moment. If Taiko were with them right now, Ishido wonders what he would say. What Toranaga believes would make him happy is that the five of them are still at odds. Ishido discloses that the council has decided to call for the lady's return or face impeachment. It is now necessary to reveal the traitors who want to take the heir's position of authority. 4 signatures are displayed to Toranaga, those of Lords Kiyama, Sugiyama, Ono, and Ishido. Because his master has done nothing wrong, Tadayoshi becomes irate. He is urged to take a seat by Toranaga, who clarifies that Ishido did not offend him. In order to perform seppuku and break his family line, Tadayoshi requests permission. Ishido thinks Toranaga's clan is prone to immature outbursts. There is no one more out of place in Japan than Blackthorn. The pilot, who is initially devoted to his Dutch employer's policy of pillage and conquest despite having little knowledge of its culture, quickly realizes how helpless he is in this region where non-Portuguese mariners have been searching for decades. Like the time Kashigi Omi, Hiroto Kanai, the ambitious junior lord of Ajiro, chops off the skull of an intruding Catholic villager in front of him, or the time he and the few other crewmen of the Erasmus are soaked in offal in their village holding cell. Cosmo Jarvis does a really good job portraying a defiant and wild-eyed character. He even carefully tuned his growly voice for Shogun. But what makes Shogun so compelling is everything that surrounds Jarvis's barbarian westerner. The striking soundtrack, the deft costume design, the acting that captures the subtle movements and hidden eye. The Erasmus is a valuable, possibly game-changing capture for Toranaga, who promptly takes the battleship from the graspy hands of Kashigi Yabashiga, Tadanobu Asano, his crude but formidable subordinate, with 20 guns, 200 muskets, and bags of looted money and bullion. We also meet Rodriguez, a very entertaining bearded Nestor Carbonell, a Spanish ship's pilot who has spent years working in Japan, when Toranaga sends Hiramatsu to Ajiro to pick up Blackthorn and transport him by ship to Osaka. Both of them speak Portuguese fluently, so they can converse in that language. Shogun substitutes English for Portuguese in the subtitles for Japanese speakers, although Rodriguez gives Blackthorn a lot of quick details about his life's journey. Similar to Shukume's philosophy that karma is like an attitude out here, and a clever little statement that refutes Blackthorn's assessment of Japan's madness. Rodriguez says to the English pilot, Zehi mo gozaimasen. One cannot resist the unseen path of nature. All we can do is accept our small part. He offers Toranaga a week to get the heir's mother out of Edo. Following the meeting, Toranaga discusses Tadayoshi's actions with a co-worker. He disapproves of all of this senseless dying. Toranaga is informed that after they get the heir's mother, they would all be put to death. Since he knows he would lose if they go to fight right now, he begs his buddy to examine the barbarian ship in Ajiro on his behalf. Everything is to stay on board the boat until Lord Yabashiga comes to check it out. As they arrive in Japan, the men find out on the ferry. The orders are said to still be in effect. Concerned about being hung are a few of the men. One says that's not how they pass away here. Fuji is informed by Tadayoshi that this is too much and that she must give up the boy. Fuji makes a suicide threat. When Toda Mariko, Anna Sawai, steps in, she finds out about Tadayoshi's deeds and how he forced their kid to die. Toda informs Tadayoshi that this is Toda Hiramatsu's granddaughter. Toda begs her to give up the child, but Fuji is certain that she needs a reason to exist. Toda claims that her goal in life is to carry out the directive to live. Yabashiga commands the inmates aboard the boat to rise and identify themselves. Try as Blackthorn might, he approaches their commander. One of them is ultimately taken prisoner by Blackthorn and his men so they may gain leverage. When he attempts to explain that they are traitors, he is attacked. Hiroto Kanai's character Omi tells Blackthorn to be nice through a translator. Omi eventually becomes enraged with Blackthorn and urinates on him. A guy is slain in front of him while he is being led away. Lord Yabashiga is presented with Blackthorn. Father Sebastio, Paul Monas de S.A., a priest, steps forward to provide their translation. Blackthorn chastises Sebastio for calling him a pirate right away. Blackthorn makes an effort to dissuade Yabashiga, Tabanobu Asano. He thinks Sebastio informed them that the only flag in Europe is the Portuguese one. As far as English sailors go, he is the first to reach his Catholic treasury. Yabashiga chooses board Blackthorn's vessel. Soon, Blackthorn and his men will be put to death. He screams that Catholics will not speak for him. Yabashige consents to provide him a place to live and a bath. He contends that Sebastian lacks evidence proving he is a pirate. To Sebastio, the pirate has to perish. Yabashige requests that Sebastio select someone else to take Blackthorn's position. Till Lord Yachiyo is called away for his writing lesson, Toranaga converses with him. Yachiyo informs Daioin that he would like to learn archery. After he leaves, Toranaga discusses a Shido with Daioin. She thinks he will murder his fief next. Toranaga swears to use his life to keep the heir safe. I don't think he can stop them. He is reminded by Daioin that people do not dread his name. Rather, his Minowara lineage is what they are afraid of. The ancestor's title is not what Toranaga wants. He doesn't want to be Shogun, even if he is informed it is time for one. That's a cruel holdover from a different period, according to Toranaga. When he disappears, Daioin queries what becomes to Yachiyo. One of the boat's soldiers is tossed into hot water while Omi observes. There is a great deal of mystery, hidden motivation, and customs that John Blackthorn doesn't comprehend or appreciate in Japan. Initially, at least. In this first episode, Shogun fits a lot of character backstory, setting of the political scene in 17th century Japan, foreboding about the pivotal conflict to come, and cultural insight. By the end, not only has Blackthorn learned a few words of Japanese, but we've also immersed ourselves in this complex world full of metaphor and flashes of morally violent action. Rodriguez informs the pilot, there's a saying out here that every man has 3 hearts. One in his mouth, visible to all. For his buddies only, he kept another in his chest. And a hidden heart that's buried far enough that nobody can uncover it. A guy needs to hide that heart in order to survive. English, you'll understand shortly. A man and a woman discuss how Yabashige's obsession with the instant of death has become apparent. Yabashige is shown around Kiki, Yuka Kori, the most renowned courtesan in Izu, as soon as he enters. Yabashige likes to see their sexual encounters. Blackthorn rises and has his meal. He smashes a window or door, then approaches a woman to inquire about his footwear. Yabashige informs Omi that the barbarian was stronger than the majority of Christians and that it took him a long time to die. Yabashige requests a poem be written on him. As Blackthorn is getting ready, he inquires about the man who is shouting. Yabashige gives Omi a tour around the community and compliments him on his work. Omi queries his uncle about whether or not he would inform Lord Toranaga of the barbarian ship. He finds out that Toranaga is confined to Osaka. They believe that once Toranaga dies, there will be a battle. It will be the Christian lords whom Ishido must battle with. They find out there's a ship here. They are approached by Hiramatsu, Tokuma Nishioka, who informs Yabashige that Lord Toranaga has asked him to wait for him in Edo. Hiramatsu inquires about the ship's gold, silver, and weaponry. Yabashige acknowledges that he ordered the removal of everything. Lord Toranaga seizes the ship and all of its belongings in his capacity as President of Foreign Affairs. Finally giving in, Yabashige volunteers to abandon the ship. As Hiramatsu departs, Yabashige, who was well versed in all matters, speculates that there could be a spy in the town. Blackthorn finds out that he is being sent to Osaka. To look after him, Vasco Rodriguez offers. Asking for the lizard's latitude, Vasco draws him to one side. Blackthorn receives word that one of his soldiers has been put to death. The remaining individuals are Yabashige's captives. The great Lord Yoshi Toranaga wishes to meet him, says Vasco. Vasco explains the significance of Shukame to him when they are traveling. Blackthorn disputes having pirate sympathies. They eventually come upon a storm. Vasco overturns the boat. If they wish to survive, Blackthorn calls out for them to pull. Blackthorn wants to search for Vasco when they survive. He debates Hiramatsu about it. Yabashige accepts to accompany Blackthorn. Because Blackthorn is an expert pilot, they don't want to allow him to descend when they locate him. In his opinion, Yabashige is reluctant to decline a challenge in front of his soldiers. Yabashige descends, stumbles, and cuts his skull. To get additional ropes, the others return. Vasco's continued respiration is confirmed by Yabashige. Fearing he would drown, Yabashige comes dangerously close to taking his own life, but the ropes save him. Convolves Toda Mariko and expresses gratitude to her for aiding Fuji. If the council decides to impeach him, she adds they would celebrate his death together. When the prisoner shows up, Toranaga wants her to interpret for him. They discuss the passing of her father, Akechi Jinsai, 14 years ago. Toranaga promises to give her a new mission. He asks if her loyalty to God would conflict with her service to him. Toda suggests she has more than one heart. Toranaga believes the barbarian could turn the tide. Blackthorn tells Vasco how Yabashiga was going to kill himself. Vasco shows him the rudder he found on his ship. He also discovered the list of Catholic bases that Blackthorn and his group intended to set on fire. Vasco forewarns him that as soon as he gets there, he would give them to the Portuguese. Blackthorn is adamant that he won't perish in this miserable place. Vasco advises him to consider if Osaka is the pinnacle of civilization by taking a close look at their city. In a world like this, does power belong to the guy you never see or the one who plans in the open? He learns about the proverb, every man has three hearts, from Vasco. They bring Blackthorn to Toranaga.
Lies! You're a pirate!
They don't know about 振る舞いを絶えず憂慮してきた。
すべて押収する思い込んでおったゆえ目が我らを結びつけたのじゃ
仏を一心にお念じなされる
ようにて恐れる
はどのようにしてその手の爪は
の身の国へ参れません虎長落ち葉はわおるか朝鮮を平定したかった思う
本当に結束を固め
いかにも賢き答えじゃ一生は内乱を立ち返ることよそれに仲間からも守って国のいた
This English mouth is like a backpash. He'll finish the work, that one. Brutal savage.
Not be so simple. I fear he'll want to come.
He's not a man to leave his fate with God.
He knows everything about Macau.
Well then, let...
通じ一七
近々のよう用心にいたしましょう。失礼いたします。
マリコ殿が同席してもか
レイディ・マリアのご同席は The Society of Jesus. You must... And I am the interpreter to the... 私の通訳では信用できないと。
Perhaps you would do me the...
I may be your enemy. 出ました。我々が友人で...
War.
国同士が争うの終わりです。ポルトガルから戦...
Episode 2 of Shogun's opening flashback tells us a lot about the relationship between Yoshi Toranaga and the former Taiko. The king ordered a political standoff to last until Yachiyo reached 16 on his deathbed a year ago. He distributed political authority among the 5 regents, although he was suspicious of personal plots. The Taiko were good buddies with Toranaga. The only thing preventing Toranaga from wedlocking Okiba was fate. The Taiko regrets not being able to subjugate Korea while at his strongest. If such were the case, he would have given Toranaga Japan. The Taiko asks Toranaga to keep an eye on Yachiyo since once the struggle for dominance started, his life would be in jeopardy. We find out a lot more in Shogun's second episode about the perilous game that Lord Toranaga is made to play, a game that really started with precise instructions the Taiko left with the Supreme Monarch in the latter stages of his life. A year prior to pilot Major John Blackthorn and his Dutch vessel Erasmus washing up stranded on a Japanese beach, Toranaga had a private conversation in the company of his dying leader, Yukijiro Hotaru. The old guy adds, "Vultures are circling." His passing will undoubtedly prompt demands for a civil war. Even worse, it would expose his youthful heir Yachiyo, Sen Mars, to being put out of commission. Although the Taiko only had faith in Toranaga, if he were to be named the lone regent, all other parties vying for power would quickly turn against him. For this reason, an alternative edict is made, in which Toranaga and the other 4 regents share authority. we have already met the cunning and strong Ishido, Sugiyama, Toshitoda, a wealthy descendant of samurai, Ono, Takeshi Kurakawa, a former warrior who became a Catholic after contracting leprosy, and Kiyama, Hiramoto Ida, who is likewise a man of faith, as long as it feeds his ambition and greed. More quiet attendants show up with official documents intended to remove Ishido from Toranaga's position. He's definitely aching for the ease of war, as he applies his official seal while eyeing his armor wistfully from across the room. The other members of the council, who are all Catholics, are offended by John Blackthorne's presence in Japan as a Protestant Englishman and will not sign the impeachment papers when he presents them to them. Ishido is upset, saying, "This morning I woke up and saw us as Toranaga must see us, bureaucrats." They demand that Blackthorne be executed. Ishido's attendants' layers of blue silk clothing, which includes elaborate golden motifs sewed onto his lapels, accentuates the sumptuousness of the outfit. These guys are all for Toranaga's removal. His name is Minawara, which was formerly connected to the highest status and title on earth. You are aware, Shogun. Even though Toranaga asserts that he does not desire the shogunate, he must nonetheless control the actions of his rival regents. The entrance of Blackthorne, also known as the Barbarian, Anjin, the Japanese term for a ship's pilot, and heretic, among the converted has worsened the already unstable political environment. In this episode, the push-pull of Shogun as a historical epic and a quiet prestige drama becomes slightly uneven, with bureaucracy taking center stage. The straightforward objective of Servants of Two Masters, which takes place almost exclusively in the few chambers of Osaka Castle, including the flashback beginning, is to set everything out. In the flashback, the Taiko informs Toranaga the vultures are circling, as he lies dying, and explains that Toranaga is the one person he trusts to keep his heirs safe until he reaches adulthood. The Taiko have established the Council of Regents to avert civil war, and Toranaga reluctantly agrees, understanding that the Council's failure to come to an agreement will surely result in conflict. In the first episode, we left Blackthorne in front of Toranaga. Fast forward to the present. Toranaga has asked Father Martin Alvito, Tommy Basto to interpret, and he has also summoned Lady Mariko to ensure that Alvito is translating correctly. But Ishido storms in and quietly implies that Blackthorne ought to be imprisoned, just as Toranaga finds out that Blackthorne's England is at war with Portugal. Toranaga concurs as the two men have a convoluted but courteous conversation that betrays their actual motivations. Toranaga's reason for locking Blackthorne up might very well be, "I only want to keep the peace." The most alone guy in the realm is the one who is at the highest point. Now, however, as Blackthorne bows down to him in an official garden, Toranaga discovers vital information that will unite him with this enigmatic stranger. The encounter is just another illustration of Shogun's masterful use of words. As a reliable backup against mischief, Toranaga also uses Lady Mariko, who speaks Japanese, Portuguese, and Latin fluently, with Jesuit priest Martin Alvito, Tommy Basto summoned to translate. Close-up shots of Toranaga and Blackthorne are shown by Shogun, who has Mariko directing and Alvito interpreting. Through the sorting of two spoken languages, each man gains an understanding of the other's mental measure, and the translation dissolves, allowing for a sort of direct connection. The bottom line is that they can benefit from one another. Blackthorne is aware of covert Portuguese outposts, such as those in Macau, that are run by Jesuits and furnished with weaponry and mercenary Ronin samurai who have converted to Catholicism. Moreover, being a perceptive and knowledgeable political observer, Marco observes that Toranaga intends to consolidate his political position by dividing the Jesuit priests, the two Christian regents, and Ishido through the Protestant, English pilot guest. But first, in order to please Ishido, Blackthorne has to survive the dismal and horrible dungeon where Toranaga dumps him. Who else but the untamed-haired Joaquim de Almeida in the role of disgraced priest Father Domingo? Domingo advises the pilot, "You can't play their games. Their hearts are too guarded, their rules too opaque." Wherein Blackthorne uses the courage that carried him around the globe to a place where he does not intend to die on a cross. Can he play their games, then? Better still, what if he triumphs? Once Toranaga is gone, the samurai Yabashiga, who is a fierce vassal sworn to serve Toranaga, breaks him out of jail. With his newfound freedom, the pilot realizes that his expertise can help Toranaga in his political maneuvers. Your nation is included in the Portuguese half. Thus, it is theirs. Blackthorn has explained how treaties between Portugal and Spain have divided the non-Christian world during another discussion in the formal garden. In addition to describing the Erasmus's passage through the Strait of Magellan in South America, he sketches a globe in the sand to show where England and Europe are in respect to Japan. A path that Portugal and Spain keep hidden. A path that is well stocked with bases. And a means by which they keeping the wealth of commerce with Japan to themselves. Toranaga seems surprised. Did the barbarian indeed declare that Japan belongs to Portugal? He asks Mariko. In his capacity as the president of foreign relations for the Regency, he also places a hold on Portugal's main commerce vessel, the Black Ship. Toranaga advises Alvito, maybe we should learn more about these bases before negotiating further, and the young priest gets all green, like he just eaten a bug. It is up to Toranaga, the president of foreign relations, to approve this permission. Ashido goes outside the castle to see Yabashiga. Yabashiga's previous general in battle, the regent, and he had a deep friendship. The latter are inspired to talk more freely as a result. He raises the prospect of Toranaga's replacement by the church and Christian regents. At that point, Ashido would be alone and competing with his opponent. But he might be able to use John's weapons and loyalties to his advantage. Upon discovering that Ashido has already signed the order for John's death, Yabashiga devises a scheme to keep John alive. After bringing John to Toranaga, he uses local bandits to assassinate the men carrying him to be executed. John uses Mariko's translation to support his arguments. He clarifies that Japan has no enemies in the Protestant Queen. The Portuguese represent a shared opponent for them both. John starts telling Toranaga all he has written in his journals. He clarifies that the Erasmus was able to land because the Portuguese and Spanish held the Magellan Pass. Japan is a component of the New World, which the two empires divided into two halves for their own purposes. Their ultimate objective is to establish their own sovereignty over the lands and remove any non-Catholic rulers. The remainder of the court, including Toranaga, is in shock. However, the regent already has a strategy in place. John is to spend the night in his quarters, per his instructions. To maintain their money and bargaining power, the Portuguese priests depend on the Black Ship to manage the trade channels, and this heretic giving Toranaga intelligence is seriously impeding their way of life. Thus, Kayama, the Catholic regent, and Delacqua, the gloomy head priest, Paulino Nunes, plot together. An assassin breaks in late at night when everyone is asleep in the West Palace quarters of Toranaga. Guards of the samurai fall as her Tanto sword sings. Toranaga hides where Blackthorn is sleeping as the alarm is activated using paper shoji panels. Being an expert at the games being played, he anticipated this onslaught. Above all, he was certain that he would not be the intended victim. And with help from Blackthorn himself, the assassin dispatches her when he comes. He informs Mariko and his son Nagakado, this wasn't Ashido. The assassin failed to target me. She arrived to get him. Shogun then cuts to the deceased assailant, her bloodied body marring the perfectly manicured formal garden's lines. The anticipation for next week's installment is heightened by the variety of Shogun hues on show in episode 2. Isn't it the show's desire to delve into the depths of Japan's medieval past through internet reading? The degree of care with which traditions and subtle cultural quirks are replicated has a significant influence. Conversely, we witness conscientious cinematography that is captivating to the audience. In episode 2, there are several instances where the content is simplified to make it extremely readable. There is really little risk of getting lost in this intricate and sophisticated cinematic universe. While some partnerships have already been formed, many more are in the works. This episode demonstrates how keen the creators are to explore the major characters against the backdrop of the instability that is developing. The entire setup felt rushed, but the tone of the show changed the moment John spoke in front of Toranaga. Subtle cinematic signals, which are easy to overlook but not so difficult to notice, convey the sense of urgency. I firmly think that Shogun will rank among the year's top programs.
Shogun.
My name is Tadamari.
To vanquish our
例の石を手に入れ、さらに
図らずもの運に恵があまりに多い。それら取りで資格
誠に本日で刀を
阿弥陀島について
奴らが忍びにございましょう。
重殿ならいくら
ならばけ
頼もしき味方ではなかった。どのような
名筋にございまする。
あの資格は暗陣を討つために送らもらいたい。さすれば朝日を眺めようではないか。
My apologies, Captain General. He has invited us to provide a report. We are here at their pleasure.
I won't lose this wind. You forget, I don't work for the...
Don't get invited back.
The longer we sit...
From my blood.
I'm...
What's been...
It is...
Christ!
오나고자.
Hello.
どちらにござりまする。
お前も加わるようにとさまよいつつ戦んだのは大変。
あれそうじゃ。
そうではない。届くところにおるように。
おいぼればば様でござりますゆえ、どこも一緒でござりまするな。
人様が今しがた万人が大阪を離れ、
頭を下げ許しをこう言われもござる。
乗り物を改めよ。
構いませぬぞ。
今すぐにお通しなされ。
ご出立とは昨べ万人が襲撃されたとか。
神様がまたお痛みをか。
旅のご無事をお祈り申し上げる。
運を天に任せるよりほか。
My lord is famous life.
Stop him.
The suspenseful third episode of Shogun Season 1 pushes the drama and high-stakes fighting to new levels. This part, titled Tomorrow is Tomorrow, puts Blackthorn and Toranaga through difficult situations that put their fortitude and strategic acumen to the test. Following his near escape from an attempted murder in Episode 2, Toranaga comes to the conclusion that continuing to reside in Osaka poses a serious risk to his family. He creates a daring escape plan since he is determined to avoid the impending danger. Yabashiga and Toranaga meet to discuss the attempt on Blackthorn's life within his castle. Yabashiga is questioned by Toranaga on his relationship, suspecting Ishido of being involved. Yabashiga acknowledges that in exchange for killing Blackthorn, Ishido promised him a position on the Council of Regents. Yabashiga stresses the need of upholding his leadership even if he acknowledges he has no interest in serving on the council. He discloses that Blackthorn, Anjin, was the intended target of the assassin and requests that Toranaga, Lady Kiri, and Blackthorn move to his fishing hamlet in Ajiro for their protection. Toranaga agrees to give Yabashiga command of Suruga province in exchange. The crew is packed quickly as they get ready to leave Osaka, realizing that time is of the essence. Nevertheless, Lord Ishido's unannounced entrance disrupts their attempts. Ishido gives them permission to go, but he is dubious. Toranaga deftly trade places with Lady Kiri, and Blackthorn sets up a distraction for the soldiers to try and examine their carriages, allowing them to get away. The team is suddenly and severely attacked, and the voyage takes a perilous turn. A furious member alerts their boss about the battle, claiming that Lord Kiyama is leading Ishido's men. Kiyama predicts that those who follow Ishido and the other heretics would perish. Buntaro, the husband of Lady Mariko, valiantly sticks behind to save Lord Toranaga, giving his crewmates a chance to leave Osaka in the process. Buntaro is left to fight the enemy on his own as the Hiramatsu reject Blackthorn's offer to save him. Blackthorn understands they have little chance of surviving if they try to sail past Lord Kiyama's warriors as they gain control of the Bay region. He suggests taking sanctuary on the Black Ship, which is renowned for its ability to withstand assaults. Taking command, Toranaga bargains with the captain, assuring them safe passage out of Osaka in return for their assistance. Toranaga offers a proposal in response to the captain's demand for a greater price. The priest will be permitted to construct a church in Edo in exchange for the captain receiving half of the gold that was taken from Macau. The father visitor must convince Lords Kiyama and Ono to back Toranaga in return. The captain makes it plain that Blackthorn is not welcome on the Black Ship, even though the father visitor concurs. A few members of the Council of Regents voice their displeasure with Ishido for allowing Toranaga to escape with Blackthorn during the meeting. But before they can finish talking, Lord Hiramatsu interrupts with some startling news. Toranaga has resigned from the council, claiming personal reasons. Ishido downplays the importance of Toranaga's departure, believing they can impeach him with a 4-0 vote. Hiramatsu, nevertheless, reminds them of Taiko's order that a vote cannot be passed until 5 regents are present. There are now just 4 regents, which is insufficient to get the required number of votes for impeachment. When the priests see Toranaga aboard the Black Ship, they give him the volumes written by John Blackthorn. After questioning him about their contents, Toranaga decides they should be put to death. But seeing that the transcription of the text would take some time, he asks Blackthorn to share his expertise with Toranaga's troops. In a dramatic change of pace, Toranaga announces that Blackthorn will no longer be referred to as a barbarian, and will instead be accepted as a Hatamoto. With this crucial turn of events, Blackthorn and Toranaga form a new partnership. The stakes are raised in Shogun Episode 3 with its fierce fights, deft maneuvers, and shifting alliances, which has viewers anxiously awaiting the next exciting development in this compelling historical drama. With its twists and turns, Shogun Episode 3 is an exciting and action-packed installment that will keep fans captivated. The stakes are rising as Toranaga and Blackthorn negotiate dangerous seas, and viewers are looking forward to the disclosures in the upcoming episode.
I have more than the deep. The free... No yesterday.
大坂では世話になったと別れ際もしそうならこれを訳させるには安心には一つの隊を鍛え
安心様
On my ship.
仲間の船乗りと船は
べきことがあるようならすよって安心を
Oh.
安心に
My lord would like you to teach him how to
Break the water.
やってみせよもう一度じゃ
また明日やらせてみてはいか
ルカの
My lord would like
二人が死んだのは
中に城を出ると聞いて困惑しておられる。
気を用いてなよって安心を
どぎ支度をいたせ。
も奥方がいりまする。追わせてもらえねばかりか。死別されたばかりでござ。私は虎長様を信じて。
整っておりましょう。拙者の映画後釜。
や
もう皆しも味方の大名もみんな討ち取ろう。
正式なご沙汰が届くまでは
All loyal to 虎長様。
今旗本になりある。
首には途方もない値打ちがござりまする。
We've met. We all shall.
Following John's attempted assassination, Toranaga fled to the fishing town of Ajiro, which was the focus of the 3rd episode of Shogun. Because Kiyama was so determined to murder John, he attacked the convoy that was commanded by Ishido's right-hand man, Jozen, and Yabashiga. Somehow, John, Toranaga, Mariko, Fuji, and the others arrived at the docks and boarded a boat to go to the Portuguese. In the opening scene of Shogun Episode 4, Kashigi Omi is getting Ajiro ready for Toranaga. Mariko tells Fuji that she is meant to be John's consort, but she declines this title since she is still grieving the loss of her husband and child. It's not a permanent employment, according to Mariko. For a single year, Toranaga is requesting that Fuji serve as John's consort. Fuji shortens it to 6 months, and Toranaga seems to be okay with this extended agreement. During a discussion about Kashigi, Nagakado abruptly reveals to Yabashiga that Toranaga is no longer a regent and that they must get ready before Ishido finds a successor. Yabashiga becomes alarmed as a result and begins to panic. Funny enough, Yabashiga says Toranaga should commit seppuku, as his resignation has put him in a tight spot. Toranaga says he doesn't have to do anything dramatic unless he receives an official order. Toranaga and Yabashiga get a hearty welcome. But Toranaga leaves Ejiro, perhaps due to Nagakado's admonition on Yabashige's loyalty, and gives Nagakado the task of preparing the gun regiment for battle against Ishido and his forces. John attempts to check at his ship and find his crew back in Ejiro, but he is stopped from doing so. Mariko tells him that his troops are in Edo and that he would be brought his firearms, pistols when needed. Furthermore, Mariko emphasizes that John's troops and ship are no longer his. Instead, they are now Toranaga's. John ties Sama to a man called Uejiru when he and Mariko arrive to the house they have been allotted. Mariko, however, clarifies that's not how Sama is used. Uejiru cannot be considered as an elder or a senior official since, I suppose, he is a servant or a member of a lower caste. Even though the guy is elderly, John addressing him as Uejiru Sama demonstrates that he is not prejudiced, despite the fact that he is British, read a history book to find out about the prejudices practiced by the British. John is a little overwhelmed by all the services he would now be able to access as a Hatamoto, and he brings up the fact that he is still a prisoner, albeit a smart one. Yabashiga bemoans the fact that, as a result of serving Toranaga, his relationship with Ishido is deteriorating. Yabashiga receives assurances from Omi that Toranaga will be impeached eventually and that he would then be the rightful owner of all the weapons and cannons taken from John's ship. He may rekindle his bond with Ishido by giving him that. John complains about Fuji being made to perform a duty he doesn't want to. According to Mariko, it's their method of preventing Fuji from going into a melancholy condition as a result of the loss of her husband and kid. John points out that it is, of course, regressive and patriarchal in character. Mariko uses the eightfold fence theory as an example to show how John underestimates the Japanese approach to problem solving. She is essentially saying, I believe, that Fuji is not as delicate as he believes. The next day, Omi requests that John give over the weapons he is carrying. It's evident that John won't comply. Fuji urges John to hand up his pistols to Mariko, who asks him to step down. Omi tries to grab it from her, but Fuji orders him to get the hell out of there and aims those pistols at him, demonstrating what Mariko was attempting to say before. There is nothing left for Omi to do but go. After that, Mariko and John meet with Yabashiga, Nagakado, Omi, and the other members of Yabashige's group to discuss displaying John's Christian weapons. John begins to embellish the story to emphasize how devastating those weapons are, but Mariko advises him to be a little more realistic. John chooses to demonstrate the cannon's effectiveness with a hands-on demonstration. It clearly impresses Yabashiga, and that puts John in his good graces. A montage features John assisting Yabashige's men in mastering the cannon, the noise of the cannons frightening the entire hamlet, and Mariko examining John's notes. John and Mariko talk about it, and Mariko tells him that just because he views the Portuguese as his opponent does not mean that he can exploit their trade connections to turn Toranaga and the Japanese against them. A baby earthquake breaks up their conversation, and Mariko uses it as a metaphor to discuss how fragile life is in Japan. She does, however, clarify that the Japanese reconstruct and move on, not viewing this fragility as a sign of weakness. Kiku challenges Omi to take over as Ejiro's ruler. Jozen, the leader of Ishido's troops, arrives in Ejiro to order Yabashiga to return to Osaka and re-establish his alliance with Ishido, further complicating matters. Jozen is advised by Yabashiga to remain in Ejiro so that John may demonstrate his weaponry, which he intends to offer to Ishido when Toranaga is effectively pushed out of the scene. Jozen consents to do that. Yabashiga returns to Osaka and orders Ishido to step down after telling Nagakado that he wants to show Jozen the guns in order to frighten him. However, Yabashiga still fears that he would be killed for betraying Ishido or for acting against Toranaga, which is why he is afraid to travel to Osaka to meet Ishido. Omi claims to have a fix in his pocket. John, Mariko, and Fuji have a charming dinner sequence in which John tells Fuji how much he has hurt her. In an attempt to gain Fuji's trust, he gives her her firearms. As a Hatamoto, John is entitled to acquire swords, so Fuji offers John her father's weapons in exchange. John reluctantly agrees to have him over for dinner, then demonstrates how he is assimilating many facets of Japanese culture into his own diet by eating fermented beans. In sharp contrast to this, we witness Omi and Nagakado discussing Toranaga's subduing methods and how he limits Nagakado's potential in a quite unsettling exchange. Finally, Omi persuades Nagakado to execute a bold action in order to gain everyone's respect. We have a nice sequence with Mariko and John talking about Mariko's background before the storm. She describes how a significant injustice affected her family and made her feel like an outsider. It's unclear what it is, but it seems like Toranaga has offered Mariko an opportunity to make amends or find a solution to this specific difficulty in her life. She asks John to talk about London and what he would do if he had the opportunity to show Mariko around the city, but she doesn't get into specifics. Of course, Mariko, pillowing John marks the conclusion. At the conclusion of the 4th episode of Shogun, we witness a practice session for cannon shooting attended by John, Mariko, Nagakado, Yabashiga, Jozen, Omi, Ishido's men, and Yabashiga's men. All appears normal until Nagakado deviates from the plan, points the cannons toward Jozen and his men, and blasts them to pieces. The gore effects in this sequence are really amazing, but in a terrible way. Yabashiga publicly declares that Nagakado's provocative action would start a conflict with Ishido while acting as though he is unaware of what is happening. He is aware that Toranaga and Nagakado would be held solely responsible for the statement's rapid propagation, which will compel Ishido to track down and murder Toranaga. Toranaga won't have time to reflect about Yabashiga's treachery while he is preoccupied with Ishido, which will allow Yabashiga to join Ishido without any problems. Toranaga will undoubtedly be dissatisfied with Nagakado's behavior. It's also possible that Toranaga foresaw this and was just following his strategy to identify the traitors and take appropriate action. If not, he will most likely order Nagakado to execute seppuku as retaliation for betraying him. Regardless, Yabashiga has undertaken a significant risk, and we will have to wait until the upcoming episode to find out if things conclude as he had hoped.
今日の演習そろそろ始められてはいかじゃ吉井虎長の息子当然
長様より廃炉職
大坂へ戻りたいと言うてきた。
I think he can still make it.
Do you mind about bathing?
そなたの
間もなく落ち葉の方が虎長を弾劾せねばな。
弾劾じゃ。
我ら大老会議は動きを封じ、あのボンクラか。前田殿を制御いたしたのが、前田殿は王の
残されませなんだゆえ。
詰めておいた浪人の一団が
主人は
文太郎であったのか。この記事は
承知しております。
いつまでも甘えるでない。もうないがの餌で釣らねば動かぬ狩りをさせるのじゃ。
One of my first chores was cleaning again.
お分かりでござい。
心得ましたか。
口にする者には安心様の動画お見えでございまする。
わしもここに投留する。万人の奥方とはどの。
The 5th episode of Shogun begins with Buntaro and the massive army led by Toranaga arriving in Ajiro. When Buntaro returns from the dead, Mariko and Toranaga discuss it. Toranaga claims that Buntaro escaped Kiyama and Ishido's attack because he had assistance from a group of Ronin. Toranaga receives Mariko's meticulous notes on John's work and informs her that she will not be moving out of John's house to live with Buntaro. Buntaro will instead take up residence at John's home. Mariko will be able to help John and her husband in this way. It is clear that Toranaga is not informed of the latest events in Mariko and John's relationship, therefore he is unable to predict what would happen in that home. His thoughts are mostly focused on Nagakado's choice to murder Jozen. In an attempt to please his father, Nagakado kills a pheasant, but Toranaga hands it to Mariko and instructs her to give it to John as a thank you gift. Next, Toranaga goes on to correct Nagakado for his ignorance. Even though he wasn't there, he urges his son to exercise caution when it comes to encouraging violence since he is aware that Nagakado's actions are a result of Yabashiga and Omi. After receiving the pheasant as a present from Toranaga, John chooses to hang it outside to decay and prepare it for a supper he enjoys. Fuji begins setting up distinct areas for the preparation of traditional Japanese cuisine and meals for the Anjin. However, Buntaro's presence cuts that short. After saying some critical things about John and Fuji, Buntaro announces that he will return for supper. I will talk about this helmet and have a few things to say about it shortly. In order to proceed with Toranaga's impeachment, the Regents' Council convenes to determine Toranaga's successor. However, their inability to agree on whether the council should be more country or more Christian appears to be tearing him apart. Even worse, Ishido ends up with Josen's head, which forces him to intensify his preparations to eliminate Toranaga and his clan. Yabashige is confronted by Toranaga about Josen's fate. Saying he was the one who persuaded Nagakado, Yabashige attempts to put Omi under the bus because he believes it would keep him in Toranaga's good graces. By designating Omi as the commander of the Anjin's artillery regiment, Toranaga deceives Yabashige. Yabashige is definitely enraged by this. Omi declares that he is prepared to resign from his role as the head of Anjin's artillery division. Although Omi is that army's formal commander, according to Yabashige, Yabashige is really in command of everything. Then, in order to let Ishido know that Yabashige is still on his side, he sends Igarashi, that would be Hiro Kanagawa, in case you haven't guessed, to Osaka. You should look at his acting credits to see what a legend he is. Meeting Miraji, the most valuable samurai in Toranaga's collection, actual name Tonomoto Akanao, Toranaga informs him that Yabashige is looking for a spy. According to Toranaga, Miraji only has to toss a dummy in Yabashige's direction to trick him into thinking the spy he's been looking for has been apprehended. John rushes to Mariko, who is sitting alone in a remote part of the forest, rather than fulfilling Fuji's request to dispose of the rotting pheasant. John is informed by Mariko that they shouldn't be seen together anymore. If Mariko wants to get rid of Buntaro, John instructs her to do it. He is told a story by Mariko about the swords he is carrying. She claims that in order to maintain Fuji's feeling of honor for her father, her grandpa purchased the swords from an inebriated warrior, not because her father died a hero. Mariko makes a connection between this story of ignorance and the reality that she is refusing to give Buntaro what he truly desires, her hatred. John makes the point that Mariko is being wounded in the end and shouldn't be making herself go through this in order to exact revenge on Buntaro. That man is a moron, and he won't get Mariko's clever kind of discipline. And what good is it if he doesn't realize that he is being punished? Mariko warns John to stay away from her and will not stop doing what she is doing, even if it means being a little more overt in her disdain of Buntaro. When John gets home, he discovers that Yuijiru has been slain for having touched the pheasant. John said that it was illegal to eat pheasant. It seems that Yuijiru put his life in danger since the smell of the dead bird was unbearable, which was sufficient justification for his murder. It was Fuji who gave the order. She begs John to also murder her for this reason. All of this disgusts John, who urges Fuji and her crew to leave him before he makes a snap decision. Afterwards, Miraji's painting of Yuijiru as the spy appears to have persuaded Yabashige that Toranaga's spy has died. I'm not quite sure what this specific storyline is about. Is Yuijiru dead because he touched the pheasant, or did Miraji kill him to keep up the pretense that Toranaga's spy is dead and subsequently kill him for defying John's orders? In either case, I believe that John learns a valuable lesson about caution from Yuijiru's death, which occurs off-screen, incidentally, regardless of the cause. He has been demeaning the Japanese thus far for taking everything so literally. But as he watches a violent earthquake take so many lives at the end of Shogun Episode 5, he comes to the realization that life is incredibly short and shouldn't be squandered carelessly. He needs to make sure that his words and deeds have some substance. The story about Yuijiru's death fits in nicely with the themes of Mariko holding in her resentment of her husband to prevent Buntaro from experiencing catharsis and Fuji's grandpa lying to her about her father's sword in order to preserve her sense of self-respect. John had intended to go from Japan with his troops, but he chooses to stay when the earthquake strengthens his relationship with Toranaga. In order to give Toranaga a sense of respect, something that was lacking due to Fuji's grandfather's deception, he even lends him his swords, which Toranaga loses in the landslide. Speaking of Fuji, despite her injuries, she makes it through the earthquake. When she sees that John is no longer upset with him, she appears content. How much John is developing as a character is demonstrated by a brief image of him rearranging Yuijiru's rock garden. Subsequently, there is a really scary moment, yes, much scarier than a deadly earthquake in which Lady Okiba sees her son and starts talking to Ishido. She expresses gratitude to Ishido for helping her escape Edo, but she also highlights how Toranaga subverted the council by denying it the ability to vote on any matter. Ishido makes an effort to persuade himself that he is making some headway in his efforts to remove Toranaga from the Council of Regents. He is informed by Lady Okiba that the council had an opportunity, but they wasted it. She will now make all of the decisions, while seeming to be protecting the heir apparent, and the council will report to her. Fumi Nikaido demonstrates her acting talent in this little sequence, and I'm excited to see what she has in store for the next episodes of Shogun.
My father's lord was
落ち葉の方
貸してもらいましょうぞ。
部屋に戻れマリコ。
何故私をと継がせるのかは、父上はそなたを大事に思ってマリコだ。
大愛なる娘、時が来た。
我らは多くの者じゃ。すなわち、わしの命を救う関東水軍の大。
As a result of Buntaro's persistent disregard for Mariko for becoming John Blackthorne's translator and for obeying Toranaga's commands, tensions between the three people reached an extreme level in the 5th episode of Shogun. In order to depict the development of Mariko and Lady Okiba's relationship, episode 6 of Shogun begins with a flashback that transports us 22 years into the past. Okiba's father continued to kill people. Thus, as they grew older, the relationship between him and Lord Akechi Jinsai came to an end. It was required of Mariko to wed Buntaro while she was preparing to become a renowned warrior. That was the last of Mariko's aspirations to become a warrior and of her relationship with Lady Okiba. The story then jumps to the present, when a memorial service for those killed in the earthquake is being conducted. John receives a fief close to Kanagawa from Toranaga as payment for saving his life, along with a yearly stipend of 600 koku. However, it doesn't end there. With the blessings of Toranaga, a foreigner is now the chief admiral of Kanto and the commander of the Japanese cannon regiment. John also receives a fresh set of swords because he gave Toranaga the ones he received from Fuji. Yabashiga responds to Omi's complaints about all of this by telling him that because they're in the midst of a war, John shouldn't be their first priority. In a humorous move, Yabashiga orders his assistant to draft a new will since he fears he won't survive this entire affair. While Ishido is holding the regents and their clans captive so they can decide who will succeed Toranaga, Hiramatsu tries to flee with Lady Kiri and Shizu. However, Kiri chooses to remain with Shizu because she is pregnant, and he instructs Hiramatsu to go to Toranaga and inform him of the situation. Father Delacroix is concerned about the increasing violence and informs Suji, I assume he goes by Martin in Christianity, that since Lady Okiba returned to Osaka, things have become worse. Suji proposes that the church establish a relationship with Toranaga because he believes Lady Okiba is anti-Christian. Since Toranaga is a member of the reputedly vicious Minawara clan, Father Delacroix opposes the idea, although he does hope that Toranaga would support them when the events between the regents are concluded. After their conversation, Lady Okiba has another flashback in which she was compelled to escape after her father was killed. Lady Okiba and the regents go to a theatrical portrayal of Taiko's rule in the current day. When Hiramatsu finally makes it to Ejiro unscathed, he informs Toranaga that in order to defeat Ishido and his supporters, they must start a project known as the Crimson Sky. Toranaga disapproves of the idea since it calls for excessive slaughter. The best part of this scene comes from Fuji. Moika Hoshi is amazing, who is slurping her tea and taking in the verbal sparring between Mariko and Jin. While all of this is going on, Mariko is seen putting in a bid for Lady Kiku in front of Jin, the owner of the tea shop where Kiku works. The entire scene is quietly hilarious. Omi is displeased because he has feelings for Lady Kiku. Although Mariko notes that it's unusual for a married lady to visit a tea house, Toranaga has granted John an exemption since he needs a translator. The entire sequence with John, Mariko, and Kiku illustrates how much John wants Mariko and how much Mariko wants John, yet they are unable to coexist due to the many traditions, norms, and obligations that separate them. The way it's edited, the shots chosen from John's point of view to show how he sees Mariko and feels when he looks at her, as well as the performances by Cosmo Jarvis, Anna Sawai, and Yuka Kori, all combine to create a strange yet lovely scenario. The next day, as everyone watches, Kiku and Jin bring John back to the village. John is clearly the object of envy for Omi and Nagakado since Toranaga is treating him so well. Furthermore, Mariko's sloppy translation of Kiku and John's talk is humorous since it makes it obvious that she is upset about what may have happened between them. When Toranaga and Mariko discuss Okiba's intentions later that evening, Mariko responds in general, saying that women are constantly at war with society and don't need a reason to make war on anybody. The conversation then turns to Mariko's dreams of becoming a great warrior and how her marriage prevented her from realizing those dreams. Toranaga tells Mariko that there are still many opportunities for her to fulfill her dreams and that she hasn't reached her breaking point. The regents convene to appoint Ito as the 5th regent at the conclusion of Shogun, Episode 5. Sugiyama, however, is against the vote because he believes that Ishido is incorrect to have set up a hostage scenario in order to sway the regent's votes and that the threat to the heir of Taiko is unfounded. Lady Okiba receives an assurance from Ishido that Sugiyama would be impeached, allowing them to proceed with their plan to assassinate Toranaga. At last, Okiba confesses that she believes Toranaga killed her father by using Akechi Jinsai, which is why she wants to murder him. She also discusses how Daioin drugged and manipulated her in order for her to conceive Taiko's successor. She uses everything as an opportunity to demonstrate how she can manage fate rather than allow it to control her. Because Sugiyama stands in the way of Toranaga, this incites Ishido to kill Sugiyama and his tribe. Toranaga starts Crimson Sky as a result. Hiramatsu clarified that Crimson Sky is a military strategy in which Osaka Castle is captured in a single blow. A new administration headed by Toranaga as the nominal shogun will be established when the Council of Regents is abolished. This implies that Toranaga will contact Seiki Nobutatsu, his half-brother, and shed copious amounts of blood. We will have to wait and see if this elevates or degrades Toranaga's legacy.
Shogun, Marikoの氷の動けない！愛の弟君、佐伯。あっぱれじゃ優筆に伝えてくれぬか。
お二人が最後に言葉を交わされた。
太刀を濡らしもせぬうちに
余計なことは言わぬよう言い聞かせた上。
兄上じゃ。大軍勢は兄上も健やかになりまする。
我らが大義を果たすた。
To proceed with their plan to remove Toranaga from office, Ishido and Lady Okiba contacted Lord Ito for the position of 5th regent in the 6th episode of Shogun. Sugiyama disagreed with this choice because he believed that the death threats made against the heir of Taiko were untrue and that Ishido and Lady Okiba had set up a hostage scenario. Shogun's 7th episode begins with Lord Toranaga's childhood fight against Mizoguchi, in which he emerged victorious and was given the responsibility of beheading the latter when Mizoguchi committed seppuku. In his future existence, Mizoguchi aspired to be the one brandishing the blade that would decapitate Toranaga. Although it may seem like a little detail, this scene is repeated throughout the current episode. After a few years, the story jumps ahead to depict Toranaga's meeting with Seiki Nobutatsu. Following a brief but friendly conversation, Toranaga and his clan accompany Nobutatsu into Ajiro. To maintain Nobutatsu's satisfaction, Toranaga employs Lady Kiku for a week. Jin reportedly consented to a cheap payment in exchange for Toranaga granting her the right to express her opinions in front of him for a set amount of time, which was determined by using an incense stick known as a time stick. Toranaga wants to advise John not to complicate matters and to behave well in front of Nobutatsu, so he enters the conversation. John bemoans his lack of utility in this whole Crimson Sky situation and requests access to his spacecraft. He merely tells Toranaga that he is prepared to carry out whatever task that Toranaga requests of him after realizing that the man will not back down. When Omi tries to speak with Kiku, Jin dismisses him and gives him a hint about the affair between John and Mariko. When Hiramatsu visits Fuji, he offers her the ashes of her husband and kid. Fuji questions Toranaga and Hiramatsu's strategy for the fight for a little while before assuring him that they would undoubtedly prevail in the end. While Nagakado is enjoying Ajiro's hospitality, Nobutatsu is musing about the approaching carnage. He is humbled by Yabashige when he tells him that, in fact, seeking pleasure from a lady is preferable than using violence. I believe that the world would have been a better place if everyone had aimed for non-toxic, consensual, reciprocal love, which isn't restricted by sex or gender, as the ultimate goal. Not coincidentally, Nobutatsu goes on to reveal that he has accepted Ishido's invitation to become a regent and that he would keep Ajiro as a prisoner until Toranaga makes the decision to give up in Osaka. In addition, Nagakado is told to kill Nobara Jozen by seppuku. Nagakado and the others are instructed by Toranaga to wait for him to make a choice for the following 24 hours. John wants to move, but he isn't permitted to. Yabashige receives Igarashi's severed head from Nobutatsu, indicating that Ishido no longer supports Yabashige. The arrival of Ishido's ship on the Ajiro coast signifies the start of a full-scale invasion. When Nagakado asks Toranaga whether he has made the decision to go to war, Toranaga responds to his little son that those who are always clamoring for blood are the ones who have never fought. Even still, Nagakado's conceit remains unabashed as he makes fun of Jin for approaching Toranaga to have a conversation. But Toranaga honors his pledge to give her some thought. Yabashige approaches John for a sparring session while he watches the ships off the coast of Ajiro, hoping that John would be able to defend himself if his pistols fail. This gives the naive Buntaro the chance to attempt John's death. He becomes aware of his foolishness and discovers that John has no fear of dying. He therefore plays the part with his tail between his legs. When Nagakado approaches Fuji, she is shown preparing for the next combat in the woods. He informs her that it was his responsibility to confront Ishido. Then, Fuji's spouse and her offspring would still be living. Fuji only urges him to worry about what can be done now and that it is useless to consider what may have occurred in the past. Next, the focus of the scenario switches to Toranaga drafting his will, which is cut short by Buntaro's desire to murder John. According to Toranaga, Buntaro must kill both Mariko and John if he believes that they are having an affair. Buntaro goes away after Mariko accepts the proposal because he lacks the bravery to do it. Mariko, embarrassed by the entire exchange, begs Toranaga to put a stop to her suffering, but she refuses. Ultimately, Toranaga chooses to meet Nobutatsu in a public space. Prior to the arrival of his half-brother, Toranaga corrects a misinformation about his bravery. He did not use a single blow to decapitate Mizoguchi. Hiramatsu claimed that Toranaga needed 9 careless blows to decapitate Mizoguchi, demonstrating how phony and false most tales of valor are. The fleeting moment of humor is tempered by Nobutatsu's appearance. He is informed by Toranaga that he would give up in Osaka. Toranaga refuses to quit, despite everyone's best efforts to stop him. John storms out of the meeting, calling everyone names, notably Toranaga. When Nobutatsu has had enough of Lady Kiku's services at the end of Shogun Episode 7, the young Nagakado confronts him with the goal of murdering him. When Nagakado trips on Nobutatsu's damp robe, strikes his head on a rock, and bleeds to death, the entire procedure goes horribly wrong. Recalling his discussion with Nagakado, Nobutatsu emphasizes his belief that death is devoid of beauty. With the upper hand, Nobutatsu can make Toranaga pay for Nagakado's imprudence before he leaves for Osaka. Perhaps that will compel Toranaga to embrace his Minowara heritage. If he doesn't have anything planned, he and his clan will be forced to follow the Council of Regents' orders for the foreseeable future. There are still 3 episodes left, so it will be intriguing to see what surprises the Shogun creators have in store for us.
Still on. I must know if my crew is alive.
あなたは手を組む相手を待ち
手を受けたばかりでござってな。
He has surrendered.
まあ釜茹でよりはした。
How long?
They will deliver us to Osaka. I to stand with us anyway.
Someone died fighting. And my translator, what becomes of her?
我らの結びつきを急ぐ代わり正門になっておった頃
に見えたとしたらそれは
するのはもうやめにしようではありませんか。どうぞ。
のない夢物語を死んだのなんだ。いつも
そりゃ大行の方で答えらと共におられぬことが信じられません。友が幸福を選ばれご自分の命を。
In the opening scene of Shogun Episode 8, Toranaga and his entire clan go to Edo, where the former regent will spend 49 days grieving the loss of his son. The army of Seiki Nobutatsu is positioned on Edo's edge to make sure Toranaga doesn't try to play the wise guy. The main focus of Shogun's 7th episode was Seiki Nobutatsu's, Toranaga's half-brother, treason. Toranaga relied on Nobutatsu's assistance in his battle against Ishido and the other regents. However, Nobutatsu made the decision to become a regent himself, compelling Toranaga to give up in Osaka. This did not sit well with John, who made it clear that he did not approve of Toranaga's ideas. Having stated that Nagakado attempted to murder Seiki Nobutatsu, after everything went terribly wrong, Nagakado struck his skull on a wet rock and passed away. No, he wasn't the target of the rock's toss. The guy staggered and went down. It remains to be seen, though, if this will make Toranaga weaker or weaker in general. We are now on episode 8. They will take him to Osaka after the period of mourning is ended. John is informed by Mariko that Toranaga is no longer required to do his duties and is free to sail back home with his troops. Mariko refuses to travel with John, saying she would stick by Toranaga all the way through. Ishido makes a few fleeting amorous overtures to Lady Okiba. The latter does not explicitly reject this unexpected suggestion for a marriage partnership, but she also does not express any opposition to it. Who knows what she's thinking, then? In any case, Omi, Yabashiga, Hiramatsu, Buntaro, and several others toast to Nagakado's memory, but only Omi calls attention to the fact that Toranaga's capitulation truly betrays Nagakado's legacy. As they travel to Nagakado's burial, Yabashiga makes several observations. To begin with, Toranaga will not be present at Nagakado's burial. Secondly, Toranaga is not in accord with the Edo generals. For this reason, they are attending the burial in their armor. Thirdly, they have enough weaponry to occupy Osaka. As part of Toranaga's capitulation, Hiramatsu orders Yabashiga to just travel to Osaka and hand Ishido the previously indicated weaponry. Despite his disbelief, Yabashiga doesn't object. A sick Toranaga is seen watching his son's burial from his castle in the meantime. Mariko and Lady Rin discuss how Lady Okiba's survivalist spirit and Toranaga's capitulation would impact their respective destiny. Buntaro interrupts, perhaps establishing his redemption narrative, saying he wants to prepare tea for Mariko. The story then switches to Tsuji, who belittles John for turning Japanese and leaving his ship's crew behind. Subsequently, he informs Toranaga that Lady Okiba is manipulating events behind Ishido's back and that the Christian regents would not support him. Thus, he requests that Toranaga team up with Lady Okiba. In the best-case scenario, the heir will support Toranaga in such case, giving him the power to overcome Ishido. Hiramatsu accepts this suggestion. Mariko also does. Toranaga, however, makes it apparent that he intends to proceed with his surrender. He assures Tsuji that he would still be able to build his church and that it won't affect his pledge to him. Furthermore, he requests that Tsuji travel to Osaka and accurately describe all he's seen in Edo. Hiramatsu sees that as a sign that Toranaga is pulling a huge hoax and has more tricks in his sleeve. Then, Buntaro and Mariko once again come into focus. Buntaro suggests that they commit suicide together and stay away from whatever Ishido or Okibo have in store for them while seeming to be making tea for Mariko. On the other hand, he poses it as though he is giving her a gift that she has been anticipating. Luckily, Mariko stops Buntaro in his tracks and tells him to postpone his murderous thoughts of her and stopping her from living the life she truly wants. Because it moves the awful Buntaro to tears, this scene in Shogun is the best. More television shows and movies should include sad males crying like Buntaro. John just gets into a heated fight with Salomon in an attempt to rally his soldiers so they can repair the Erasmus and head home. The next day, John tries to team up with Yabashige. He claims he can assemble the personnel required to get the Erasmus running. However, he needs a flag to fly. In order to guarantee their future in these turbulent times, Toranaga wants Yabashige to support him as he approaches his demise and vice versa. John goes so far as to remind Yabashige of the cliff event in order to emphasize the idea that one may control their own destiny. But because Yabashige doesn't want to betray Toranaga, he declines to work with John. In another scene, Lady Jin surveys the plot of land that would serve as her tea house's protected area. It is revealed that Suji's church would be located close to the courtesan site when he arrives. The Christians won't object to this arrangement if they are progressive. They will be against this arrangement if they are regressive. The metaphorical ball is now in their court, thanks to Toranaga. While pleading with Okiba to free the captives and presumably regretting what she has done to Okiba's mental state, Lady Dioen dies back in Osaka. The generals of Edo, Hiramatsu, Buntaro, Yabashige, Omi, and others attend the signing of the Pledge of Loyalty. Toranaga declares that Yabashige will travel to Osaka to bring the firearms to Ishido along with the names of everyone who will also surrender. All of the generals disagree with Toranaga's choice to surrender without a fight. Remaining unwavering, Toranaga declares that he will not tolerate any more deaths at his hands. Hiramatsu issues a warning, saying that Toranaga will be killed by seppuku if he doesn't engage in combat. Not even that can convince Toranaga. So, after slashing his belly, Hiramatsu calls Buntaro to behead him. Even when it appears like Toranaga has given up on himself, he assures Buntaro that he shouldn't give up on Toranaga. And with that, Hiramatsu passes away. Subsequently, Toranaga discloses that everything was a part of his scheme to align John and Yabashige with him while creating the impression that Ishido and Okiba were against him. It seems that Hiramatsu's passing was a necessary sacrifice. How may Toranaga benefit from this? I'm curious to see if it really affects Toranaga's strategy to eliminate Ishido and Okiba, but I'm not sure. Shogun, Episode 8, ends with Lady Dioen getting ready for her burial. It appears that Lady Okiba agrees to Ishido's suggestion for them to be married and establish themselves as Japan's power couple. John and Yabashige may be seen getting ready to invade, rather than submit, in Osaka. Omi alerts Yabashige of the potential costs of this partnership, but Yabashige ignores him because he is too relieved that his death is not in vain for Toranaga. But Mariko spoils Yabashige's intentions by promising to see to it that he gets to Osaka and gives himself in on behalf of Toranaga. It remains to be seen now if Yabashige would have the guts to stand up to Mariko. Returning to Edo, Toranaga ends his stay with the sick old sad man, and pays a visit to Nagakado's cremation site to express his gratitude for inadvertently allowing him the time he needs to amass his resources. It's clear that Toranaga intends to pour blood and that he has an army within easy sight of everyone. He simply waits for his adversaries to become complacent so that they are completely caught off guard when he launches his attack. The miniseries' last 2 episodes will undoubtedly be jam-packed with action. Thus, be ready for everything that may arise.
真に思っておるのじゃ。こうすると約束なされ。
族か、それとも日の見えてもじゃ。どうもできておるか。
覚悟は。
のはこれで3度目じゃ。養児費をかけておるに。あの方は。
In my culture, we would say, 私もあなた世の中の目的で。Our Father. 見失った時。
Why did he send? Right.
The roster of prominent individuals who perished in Shogun is becoming longer. A significant turning point in the mini-series occurred with the pitiful demise of Toranaga's son, Nagakado, who appeared to put the underdog on the defensive. However, Toranaga planned his next action during the time of grief. But because he kept his plans a secret, his own people continued to assume the worst. Everyone was therefore startled when Toranaga declared he was going to turn himself into a Shido. Hiramatsu took his own life, hoping to persuade Toranaga to reconsider. But Toranaga was determined to show Ishido that he was powerless, so he remained in place. He told Mariko simply that he was hiding something from her, and that if she helped John and Yabashiga go to Osaka to declare his surrender, he would be able to tell it. And, well, she didn't have a good experience. Hiramatsu took his own life, hoping to persuade Toranaga to reconsider. But Toranaga was determined to show Ishido that he was powerless, so he remained in place. He told Mariko simply that he was hiding something from her, and that if she helped John and Yabashiga go to Osaka to declare his surrender, he would be able to tell it. And, well, she didn't have a good experience. John notices that the Portuguese are still defrauding the Japanese in their economic dealings. They then make their way to the castle. Mariko restates that Ishido is enslaving the families of the regents in Osaka, which is the reason behind his actions. Yabashiga, in the meantime, restates the suggestion they will make to Ishido. When Mariko gets back together with Lady Shizu and Kiri, they bemoan the circumstances that forced them to exist. Before we go back to the conference involving Yabashiga, John, Okiba, Mariko, Ishido, the regents, and their families, we show the Portuguese speculating briefly about what Toranaga and his delegation are going to do. After Kayama and Yabashiga exchange a few brief words on their objectives, Yabashiga abruptly declares that he and John would provide Ishido with all of their available artillery. Kayama laughs at this notion because he wants the church to judge John. According to Yabashiga, John is currently outside the church's purview. John criticizes Kayama for supporting the Portuguese while being a man of faith. In essence, Kayama responds that he is fond of money and that the Portuguese should be his allies because they were there first. This is a fairly poor response. That being said, Ishido rejects Yabashiga and John's offer of allyship, making the meeting a complete failure for them. Subsequently, Mariko appears to inform Ishido that Toranaga is still in grief and declares her intention to go for Edo together with Kiri and Shizu. Ishido is clearly keeping people captive in order to ensure that his ideas are approved without challenge, as he starts to openly oppose Mariko's departure from Osaka along with Kiri and Shizu. Ishido refuses to budge, telling Mariko that she must wait for the regents to make a decision on her ability to go. Yabashiga is visibly shocked and incensed by Mariko's choice to speak out against Ishido, particularly given that he is attempting to gain the dictator's trust. When John attempts to figure out why Mariko is acting in the ways that she is, she only asks that he keep his mouth shut. Ryuji treats his mother disrespectfully for standing up to Ishido. It seems like all the Nazi propaganda that permeates Osaka has indoctrinated him. Mariko goes on with her plan to leave the palace even if that upsets her. There is a lot of bloodshed. Mariko is compelled to pick up a weapon. It is made clear by Kayama and Ono that they are terrified to take action against Ishido since doing so would put their families' lives in danger. Mariko ultimately proves what she set out to establish, which is that Ishido rules Osaka with an iron grip. In order to prevent a single individual from controlling all of the nation's policies and decisions, the Taiko instituted the system of regents. And until the heir became old enough to govern, these regents were meant to uphold the current state of affairs. Ishido has disregarded the Taiko and gone against this decision by behaving in an autocratic manner. Mariko announces that since she isn't being allowed to serve her lord, Toranaga, she is going to die by suicide at the end of the day. Mariko is Christian, and that's why she asks Lord Kayama to be her second so that she isn't condemned to go to hell. Ishido prevents Kayama from doing so, even though Okiba warns Ishido that if Mariko dies, there's going to be an uprising that he won't be able to handle. On the flip side, if Ishido allows Mariko to leave, he has to let everyone else leave, too, which is something that Ishido doesn't want to do. Later on, Okiba meets Mariko, and she tells her to put a stop to her games. Mariko is adamant about sticking to her course of action because she feels it is correct. As the mother of the heir, Mariko informs Okiba that she has the authority to put an end to this whole situation. Okiba sheds her icy facade and displays emotion for the first time in the performance. John makes an unsuccessful attempt to stop Mariko from ending her own life. Thus, John aggressively tramples over the compound's arid garden. Ishido sends Yabashiga a message about his subservience. Mariko goes to her seppuku ritual after Father Martin leads a joint prayer. As Kayama fails to appear, John chooses to be her backup. Just when Mariko is ready to stab her heart, Ishido suddenly shows there and saves her life. He tells her that she may go and that anybody else who wishes to depart Osaka can make a request, which will be reviewed and authorized if necessary. As they prepare to depart Osaka at the end of Shogun, Episode 9, everyone appears to be in a festive mood. John and Mariko start working on the pillowing task. But Yabashiga throws a curveball at that point, allowing the shinobi, ninja to enter the castle in order to eliminate Toranaga's group and kidnap Mariko. When Mariko chooses to sacrifice herself in an explosion set up by the shinobi, things go terribly wrong. I do believe she is dead. It's a really unsettling way to wrap up Mariko's entire story. Mariko was upset at her fate, just as Okiba had stated earlier in the show. She was angry because she had done everything right and yet she was destined for an unhappy existence. When no one was watching, she was able to accomplish her goals, including her relationship with John. Her faith remained unwavering. She remained devoted to Toranaga throughout. Was her death significant, though? I am aware that the passing of a nobleman typically incites people to demonstrate against the relevant tyrant during fascist times. Mariko's father was a betrayer. In my opinion, she was not wrong to have an affair because, in the past, women were allowed to pillow anybody they choose if men were allowed to have concubines. It shouldn't be beneficial for males alone to legalize polygamy, is it? Nevertheless, the public remained unaware of Mariko's love relationship. Therefore, it's possible that word of Mariko's disobedience may cause a stir in the public and boost support for Toranaga. That being stated, do you believe Toranaga can continue his deception by sacrificing Hiramatsu and Mariko?
Smothering.
She knows we're in here. Army of Japanese assassins.
Riko-sama.
Mariko殿は
抗議文でござります。江戸を抜け出し、戦の支度を。
肝心なのはきれなと思うとに終止符を打つことこそ我らのあの者が明智家の身内
加わっていただきとうござりまする。
で戦と決まらばもう我らはの方はようなったか。じゃあマリコ殿は捕らえられるだけ。
In the penultimate episode of Shogun, Mariko made the decision to stand up to Ishido by giving her life in order to rescue the regent's families from Ishido's captivity. It appeared for a while to be a grand scheme to make Ishido give up control of the regents. But in the closing seconds of the show, Ishido smuggled the shinobi inside the castle quarters using Yabashiga. It seems they were just going to abduct Mariko because it was starting to get to be a big problem for Ishido. But in the end, they detonated a bomb, killing Mariko. In the last episode of Shogun, let's see how her passing affects the paths taken by Yabashiga, John, Toranaga, and Ishido. In an unusual scene from the first episode of Shogun 10, we find an elderly John Blackthorne laying in bed with his grandkids looking over his Japanese treasures. After, it is established that Mariko has passed away as the mini-series goes back to the explosion site. It is important to note that Mariko appears to be injury-free. There was a door between her and the explosive device, and it detonated on her back. At their discussion about Mariko's passing, Ishido and the regents don't seem to be at ease with Ishido's strategies. Ishido learns from Seiki Nobutatsu that Toranaga traveled to Edo in order to be ready for battle. That doesn't bother Ishido since he believes he has enough men to win any fight. He even accuses Toranaga of being responsible for Mariko's passing, claiming that he sacrificed her to make it appear as though Ishido was the one who killed her. Nevertheless, the Christian regents desire that Mariko be buried with honor. It is only until Lady Okiba asserts her will that Ishido agrees to this idea. Ishido tries to sidestep the conversation of John Blackthorne as well, claiming that he no longer concerns him. The superstitious regents begin to question Ishido's intentions when an earthquake strikes Osaka just as he is signing the papers to go to war with Toranaga. Ishido requests that Yabashige get his troops ready in an attempt to express gratitude for his assistance. Nevertheless, it appears that Yabashige's shell shock hasn't gone off, and the terrible results of his deeds have driven him insane. As John is being brought to Toranaga per Lord Kiyama's orders, the attention turns to him. John is escorted into the woods by Father Martin. They discuss the intricate details of Toranaga's schemes and if Mariko's spirit was at rest when she passed away for a considerable amount of time. As John heads out of the Osaka docks, Martin tells him that Mariko asked the church to grant John permission to live, and that Martin has complied with her last wish. When John learns that Mariko's final appearance before her faith and God was for him, he is overcome with emotion. Talking about Mariko's poetry, Lady Okiba and Yachiyo allude to Okiba's shifting loyalties. When they get in Ajiro, they discover that John's ship has been destroyed, despite the insane Yabashige's request for John to carry him to England aboard his ship. It appears that Omi has taken Toranaga's side, as he brings Yabashige to Toranaga for approval. John is told by Miraji that it's conceivable the Christians destroyed his ship because they don't want him to assist Toranaga with its guns and consider him a heretic. It seems that Toranaga has searched all around Ajiro for these pirates. He gives Yabashige the command to end his own life because he planned Mariko's demise. Yabashige asks Toranaga to give John the opportunity to be his second. Toranaga declines the proposition on the grounds that John is still a Anjin, despite becoming a Hatamoto. Yabashige proposes that Toranaga be his second, and Toranaga agrees. When John and Fuji get back together, the way the scene is framed suggests that they are thinking of Mariko silently. Toranaga expresses gratitude to Shizu for keeping his kids safe. From Okiba, Kiri brings a message to Toranaga. Although it's ambiguous, it most likely indicates that she wants to support Toranaga in order to respect Mariko. John is informed by Fuji that she will be entering the nuncy after serving as his consort and fulfilling her obligation to Toranaga. After wishing her well, John urges her to schedule a meeting with Toranaga. It is similar to a scenario from a previous episode where Omi urged John to give up his firearms when Omi arrives to escort John. John and Fuji, however, aimed the firearms toward Omi. I believe Omi is surprised that John gives up his sword and rifle now that he has had them for so long. John assures Toranaga that the Ajiro people are not guilty. It was Mariko who destroyed the spacecraft, not them, in order to save John's life. Toranaga need to quit frightening the Ajiro people as a result. Toranaga declines John's suggestion. John then makes the decision to use seppuku in order to save Ajiro. This prevents John from taking his own life by persuading Toranaga that he has no malice in his heart. John is given the task of rebuilding the ship and enabling his fleet. Yabashige offers Omi his final poetry. Even though it was written so badly, it's difficult to laugh at because it was read before Yabashige passed away. Taylor Swift's most recent album, dubbed Tortured Poet, has inspired a ton of memes. I suppose I'll classify Yabashige under that heading. Yabashige leaves his kosho with his ultimate wishes. He goes to where Toranaga is waiting to murder Yabashige, at the edge of a cliff. They discuss Toranaga's combat plans after having a brief conversation regarding Omi and John. First of all, Toranaga admits that he destroyed John's ship in order to force John to support him rather than the Christian regents. Second, he tells Yabashige that he persuaded Okiba to sever her relationship with Ishido by using Mariko's passing. Ishido has already lost the fight before entering the battlefield if he does not have the heir's troops. Lastly, he raises the possibility of taking over as the official leader and bringing in a period of calm and harmony. Upon that note, Toranaga beheads Yabashige after he performs seppuku. John takes Fuji out to sea at the conclusion of Shogun to immerse her kid and her husband's ashes. In addition, John surrenders the crucifix he has been carrying for Mariko, suggesting that the events from the past are really illusions from his mind. John goes back to the coast to begin repairing his ship. Buntaro follows him, and despite their lack of communication, it appears that they have put the differences behind them. When Toranaga turns to face the ship, John, and finally Japan, the triumphal music implies that Toranaga has come out on top in this complex but fascinating struggle. Many people will probably be a little let down that there wasn't a conflict after all. Although Toranaga's goal and the plot's purpose are clear, the entire conclusion did feel a little underwhelming. I'm not sure whether this is a good or negative thing. Having said that, I shall express my happiness for Hiroyuki Sanada. It is my goal that this exhibition inspires others to view his vast body of work, and my prayer is that he is able to play many more fascinating roles soon.